All right, let's dive in. Today, we're deconstructing what is, I would argue, the most critical foundation of any successful information security management system, or ISMS. We're talking about Clause 4. You can think of it as the blueprint for absolutely everything that comes after it, and you've got to get it right before you even think about laying a single technical brick. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about the whole strategic point of Clause 4. Then we'll walk through understanding your context, figuring out who your interested parties are, and then actually defining your scope. And we'll wrap it all up with the ongoing commitment that really holds the whole thing together. You'll see how each piece logically just builds right on top of the last one. Before we can even begin to talk about firewalls or encryption or any of that stuff, we have to answer two really basic questions. Why are we even doing this? And where do our responsibilities actually begin and end? That's exactly what Clause 4 is all about. It forces an organization to stop and define those things first. Yeah, exactly. This is not the tactical, in-the-weeds part of the standard. This is the 30,000-foot view. It's about making sure that information security is perfectly aligned with the real purpose of the business. You want to make sure it's not some isolated IT function, but a genuine strategic priority. Because if you get this part wrong, the entire system you build on top of it, well, it's going to be on a really shaky foundation. Okay, so that brings us to our very first step, Clause 4.1, which is all about understanding the organization and its context. What the standard is asking you to do here is to identify all the external and internal issues that are relevant to your purpose. The things that could actually affect your ability to get the security results you want. And this is where the standard does something really smart. It formally requires you to look in two directions, both inward and outward. So internally, you're looking at things like your own company culture, your organizational structure, your existing contracts. But externally, you've got to scan the horizon. What's happening in the market? What new laws are coming? Are there new technologies that could change everything? This forces a really complete, holistic analysis right from the get-go. So once you've kind of mapped out that whole internal and external landscape, the next logical step is to figure out who the key players are. This is Clause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of what the standard calls interested parties. Put simply, it's asking, who actually cares about your information security, and what do they need from you? Now, you might be wondering, who exactly is an interested party? Well, this definition is incredibly broad, and for a very good reason. It's not just your customers. It's your employees, your board of directors, government regulators, your suppliers. Heck, even your competitors could be interested parties. Basically, anyone who has a stake in how you protect your information needs to be on your radar. The best way to think about this process is like a funnel. First, you identify everybody who might be relevant. Second, you figure out what their specific security requirements actually are. And third, and this part is absolutely crucial, you get to strategically decide which of those requirements you're going to formally address in your ISMS. You don't have to do everything, but you do have to make a conscious, deliberate choice. So what this step really does is it takes all these vague expectations and makes them formal obligations. These requirements suddenly become concrete legal, regulatory, and contractual duties. You're basically turning this abstract cloud of stakeholder needs into a very clear, manageable list of commitments. Okay, so we have a solid grasp of our context, and we know what our stakeholders need. Now, finally, we're ready to draw a line in the sand. This is Clause 4.3, and it's where we determine the precise boundaries and applicability of our information security management system. In other words, we establish its scope. And this just shows you how beautifully it all connects, right? The scope isn't just something you pull out of thin air. The standard explicitly says that it has to be a direct result of your analysis back in 4.1, your internal and external issues, and 4.2, your stakeholder requirements, plus any interfaces you have with other organizations. Your scope has to flow logically from all that foundational work. And this isn't just a suggestion, by the way. It's a requirement. The scope must be available as documented information. Writing it down makes it real. It provides absolute clarity for your own team, for management, and especially for external auditors. There's no ambiguity about what's in and what's out of your ISMS. All right, we're at the final piece of the puzzle here in Clause 4, and it's all about commitment. This is the part where the organization formally pledges not just to build the system, but, and this is so much more important, to actually operate it, maintain it, and keep it going. This one sentence right here, straight from the standard, is really the heart of the matter. Just listen to those verbs: establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve. This tells you everything you need to know. And ISMS is not a set it and forget it kind of project. It's a living, breathing part of how the organization runs. So ultimately, what Clause 4.4 does is commit the organization to a continuous cycle. It's never done. As your business changes, as stakeholder needs evolve, as new threats pop up, your ISMS has to adapt right along with them. It's an ongoing process of management, not a one-time thing you can just check off a list. And that's really the big question to leave you with. Building the blueprint is absolutely essential, but the real test is how you manage the boundaries you've set. It's those interfaces with your suppliers, your partners, all those other organizations. That's often where a perfectly defined scope can start to get blurry, and that's where the greatest risks are hiding. Mastering those dependencies, well, that's your next critical challenge.